Good evening. I am Father Smoke, and welcome to the Void. It didn't actually happen to me, but it happened to my mom when she was a teenager. My mom is now in her mid-60s. She's not an overly religious woman. She doesn't read the Bible regularly, rarely goes to church, but she prays every night, 'cause that is what gives her comfort. I'll have to side note this. I watch normal horror movies with her every so often. Nothing too crazy or gory, but spooky if you're into that sort of stuff. Well, I asked if she wanted to watch The Exorcist, and she flat out 100% refused. She said there's absolutely no way she will ever watch anything related to possession or exorcisms. Well, this was curious. So the movie Constantine comes out, and I show her the trailer asking her if she wants to watch it. She sees the girl near the beginning climbing the ceiling, and just refuses again. I should also note, my mother will refuse and kick you out of her house if you even think about bringing a Ouija board into the house. She'll yell, scream, and cuss until you drop the subject. And that's that. This is important to her. Alright, so that little backstory is out of the way. I ended up asking her why exactly she refuses to watch those sort of movies. She tells me when she was a teenager, at a sleepover, at a friend's house. They were up playing games, the parents watching TV. Her friends and herself were on the floor playing a board game. A game my mom has never played before. We'll come to find out. It's a Ouija board, and she doesn't know what it does. Well, they start playing, asking a bunch of questions. They end up finding out there's a spirit in the house, so they ask it to show itself. Nothing happens. They demand it to show itself. This was her first indication something wasn't right, 'cause the lights all around the house, every single room, went out immediately, including the TV, and then snapped right back on. Spooky, huh? Nah, just a fluke. They ask the next question. Who are you? The piece moves around the board in big circles with their hands on it and stops on the letter D. Moves to the letter E, then to the letter V-I-L. Someone must be messing with it. This can't be real. So they ask, if you are the devil, then show yourself. Nothing happens for a while, and then suddenly the TV goes out, and the reflection of the TV sitting in the room next to them, my mom and her friends, even her parents, could make out a shape of something terrifying just sitting there next to them. Then the house got extremely cold. Suddenly, loud noises could be heard in the kitchen, stuff flying off the top of the refrigerator and cupboards, opening and closing. They immediately stop the game, close it up, and throw it in the trash, never to play again. Later that night, my mom is sound asleep and is awoken by something loud and clanging on the roof. She listens intently, and she can hear what sounds like chains and dogs on the roof. That's not possible. It must be outside somewhere. She wakes up the next morning and goes to talk to her friend's parents. Asks them if any of their neighbors have any dogs. They tell her no, and they tell her they also heard the dogs and chains up on the roof last night. So that's the story why my mom refuses to watch anything that involves exorcisms. She truly believes that the devil was there with them that night, sitting next to them, and then messed things up. Every time she tells me that story, I get this cold shiver down my spine, and I truly believe there's no way she was making it up. In the late 1980s, as a curious teen, I became fascinated with the occult. As a child growing up in a religious household, my first exposure of occult themes came from the Bible. I always strained to understand my beliefs concerning the teachings of the church, and especially struggled with my own faith in God. After learning that demons were former angels who rebelled against God, were cast down to earth, and could interact with humans, I came to the conclusion that the best way to prove to myself that God existed was to see if demons existed. There was no internet back then to explore my questions and sate my curiosity. Knowledge of the occult was hard to come by and had to be searched for in libraries and bookstores. In time, I collected a small library of books about witchcraft and demonology. Looking back now, I realized how foolish I was. I didn't understand what I was getting myself into. Those books have since been destroyed after what happened to me. I began reading these books and actively trying to invite demons into my life. I read out loud long strings of demonic names out of the books. I would cast spells and draw symbols on my walls and on the floor. Nothing happened. I had a few strange dreams, but that wasn't proof of anything. Then one day, I came across a paragraph that told me to get a full clove of garlic and stake it with a large iron nail to attract demonic power to a place. I did this and put the staked clove deep in my closet. The demons didn't come to me suddenly with a large fanfare. They came gradually, insidiously, working their way into my life and psyche without me hardly noticing until they were ready. Then they pounced, and I was almost destroyed. I woke up more frequently with nightmares. I woke up sometimes listening intently because I could have sworn that what had awoken me was laughter or whispering. I passed these off as dreams. Sometimes I woke up paralyzed for a few seconds. I passed this off as sleep paralysis. I woke up sometimes with all my sheets on the floor, far from the bed. I awoke some nights thinking, was my bed just moving? I passed this off as restless sleep. Then one night, I woke up to watch my hand and arm shoot out of my side, grab the lamp on the night table, and throw it across the room with such force that I pulled my shoulder out, and the lamp practically exploded against the wall opposite. I sat in the dark, cradling my arm, wondering how I could do such a thing out of a deep sleep. A few nights later, I did the same thing with a new lamp, with the same arm. I had to wear a sling to restrict movement of the shoulder. A few nights later it happened one more time, but I didn't grab the lamp. I tore the sling right off my neck. I thought these things were strange, but I still proceeded to invite the demons. I was still not convinced. I was a fool. I became irritable, and my family started to notice. I became lazy with my schoolwork, distant and withdrawn and argumentative. My parents thought I might be on drugs. I was brought to a psychologist who tested me for them and diagnosed me with depression. I told no one what I was up to. Over time, the odd occurrences increased, but due to time and space and some embarrassment, I will leave some out. I will tell you that late one night, I awoke to the full moon shining on my face through a window. I debated telling you this part because it sounds so strange, but I began growling at the moon. I remember not thinking as myself. My thoughts were basic and primal. I began growling more ferociously until I was practically foaming at the mouth and snapping at the moon like a rabid animal. I eventually snapped out of this and wondering what the hell I was doing. I didn't know yet, but at this point, the demons were ready to pounce. They felt they had weakened me enough and worn me down, the walls between worlds within my room, enough to extract my soul from my body. These recollections are the most vivid in my mind. One night, I awoke and felt very strange. I felt a jarring disjointedness. Then part of myself lifted out of my feet and then worked up my body until I was floating above the bed. It felt something like if you were to smoothly pull a piece of tape off of a flat surface. I was floating above my bed, and I was looking down on myself. I tried to move, but knew somehow I would have to learn how. After being amazed at what was happening, I then felt that something grabbed my feet, or lower part of myself, and started to violently shake me like a rag doll. I felt like a streamer being whipped back and forth. I saw one side of the room, then the other flash before my eyes. Something was trying to tear me away from a connection I still had to my body, lying on the bed. I was terrified, and I knew that whatever was doing this, to me, if it succeeded, I would die. But the cord, I don't know what it was, tying me to my body was too strong. They could not break it. They gave up and let go, and I floated lazily up to the ceiling. I remember distinctly my cheek resting lightly against the ceiling in my room. I set my eyes on a specific imperfection on the ceiling I had studied many times from below, but it was now inches from my face. I remember thinking how it looked different from there. Suddenly, I was in the bed, looking up at the ceiling where I just was. I was taking deep breaths, like I needed air. I still felt strange and was paralyzed with fear. I felt my chest getting heavy. I took a deep breath, but the feeling stayed. Now, I felt as if I was being pushed down, but did not feel any pressure on a specific place. It was as if some invisible weight had been draped over my torso and was getting heavier. I remember thinking that this is just a dream. There is no way any of this is happening. Then I heard a sound I will never forget as long as I live. I heard the sound of the bed creaking. I was sinking into the bed, and the sound of the bed warping under the increasing weight was real. This was really happening. In a frenzy of fear, I burst out of the bed and ran out of the room and the house. I went to my sister's house who lived next door and woke her up to let me in. I was wide-eyed and hyperventilating. She eventually calmed me down and began asking questions. I did not tell her about what I had been doing and told her I had saw a ghost. She laughed it off and told me to stay the night if I wanted to. I stayed, but I did not sleep again that night. By the next day, I knew what I had to do, so I went back to my house and up to my room. I quickly went into the closet, grabbed the clove of garlic with the staked nail, which was now black, and took it outside. My parents' house is made of stone, and I found the largest open space of the wall with no windows and threw the clove against the stone. I swear the thing exploded against the wall, like I had thrown a grenade. There was nothing left. I never found a piece of that clove or the nail. I threw all occult materials, objects, and books I had into the wood stove and burned them. I cleaned the symbols off the walls and furniture, and I never slept in that room again. Nothing like what I have told you ever happened to me after that. I think whatever demonic and human it was had their chance once, but they failed, and they never bothered me again. So, do I now believe in God? Surprisingly, I'm still not sure that I do, but I do know that there are absolutely malicious entities in this world, and if you invite them into your life, they will gladly come in. When I was about 16, I had an experience I will never forget. I am very skeptical even with the experiences I had through my life. So even telling this story still, it seems surreal. There's a bit of a background story, but since I don't want to puke out my life story, let's just say that from a very young age, my life was constantly filled with negativity, and I believe everything that happened before this experience definitely had something to do with it. I was friends with a group of people who practiced Wicca, and it was something I was interested in, so I learned a lot from them before this happened. It's a beautiful craft, and so open and welcoming. They were more experienced, as they had a few years of practicing before I even entered the picture. Anyway, on Halloween or Samhain, we wanted to pay our respects to those who had passed, and so we decided to cast a circle in our local cemetery. The circle was cast by an angel statue that had been built for the children buried in the cemetery. Now normally the door to the circle is closed, but we left it open to invite any spirits to the offerings, food, and drink. My friend Kate went off on her own to speak with someone who had just died a month before, and my other friend Meg and I stayed in the circle, both silent as we did our own thing. I was upset and already at a vulnerable point in my life, as I was dealing with depression from the death of my father. He committed suicide when I was 6, and I wanted some peace. I wanted to hear from him and understand how he could leave his family like that. I opened the door even wider. A rush of wind came in the circle and knocked Meg over, landing on her black mirror, breaking it, which means bad luck. She was spooked by it, but I didn't experience anything. It was completely quiet. She told me to go to Kate, so I stood up and told her to come back to the circle. She was reluctant, but came back with me. When we were all in the circle, Meg told Kate about what had happened, so we started picking up the food and other things in the middle of the circle so we could officially close it. I can't explain to you what it feels like. The best way to describe it is like something is invading your space. It's uncomfortable, and it's almost like it's trying to shove you out of the way to make room. I literally felt like two different people, and the invader was trying to gain control. Meg noticed I looked different and asked if I was okay. I didn't answer her, and then I crouched down on the ground, my nails digging into the dirt, and I was swaying back and forth before I knew it, and I turned away from them, threw back my head, and let out a piercing, high-pitched scream that lasted for about a minute. After the scream slowly died off, I started shaking and turned to them. I remember saying, "Something's wrong," and then they grabbed me by the arms to keep me still and started saying a Wiccan prayer. I tried saying it with them at first, but I literally growled before I could finish the sentence. I felt like I had no control. I felt hatred and anger, but I kept on trying, and eventually I could say it, and began to feel like a weight had been lifted off of me. We closed the circle, we went home, and that was that. We didn't talk about it. I laid in bed thinking I would never be in a vulnerable state like that again, that I would be strong. I imagined a white shield surrounding my house and myself. I started working more with energy and stepped away from any type of religion, focusing more on the spiritual. Not because I didn't like Wicca, I just knew things had to change. I never told my mom or any of my friends. It was just the two of them and me. Was it a demon? Who knows? People think demons are the only things that can possess. But when a spirit has enough energy, there's a whole lot more they can do. So, nothing extravagant. No speaking in tongues, or throwing people twice my size. Just something that ended quickly, but changed my life and my perspective forever.